Welcome to a place where silence is broken, where love long thought dead finds its way back into trembling hands and beating hearts. Here, you'll hear stories that cut deeper than simple romance, stories of lives lived in quiet emptiness, of hearts that waited decades to be seen again, of passion buried yet never fully gone. These are the voices of rediscovery, of touch that awakens the soul, of desire that returns not as fleeting fire, but as love reborn in its most vulnerable form. Every word is a confession, every moment a reminder that intimacy can survive even the coldest years and return stronger, richer, more sacred than ever before. If you've ever wondered whether love can rise again after silence, you are in the right place. The house was never quiet in the way silence should be. It wasn't the kind of silence that brings peace, but the kind that weighs on the skin, pressing down on the chest, making every breath heavier than it should be. Days stretched into years, and those years into decades, each one layered with routines that looked like life, but felt more like survival. Breakfast was shared at the same table, but without words that mattered. Conversations became about weather, bills, schedules, but never about feelings. There were smiles sometimes, but even those felt rehearsed, painted on like masks worn for comfort rather than truth. Lying beside someone every night, yet feeling invisible, became its own kind of torment. It's a strange ache to know that a body is only inches away, but might as well be across an ocean. A hand that once reached out in the dark stopped moving. A glance that once lingered now slipped away before it could land. The slow death of touches was harder to endure than arguments would have been. At least anger means passion, but silence is the slow burial of the heart while it's still beating. There were nights when the longing grew too sharp to swallow. Staring at the ceiling in the dark, listening to the sound of steady breathing next to me, I wondered if that sound still came from the man who once whispered my name like it was the most sacred word in the world. Now it was just air moving in and out, a rhythm of life without rhythm of love. The sheets felt colder even when the body was there, because closeness without connection only makes loneliness sharper. The heart doesn't stop needing, no matter how much time passes, no matter how many days of distance pile up. It still beats with the same hunger for touch, for intimacy, for a hand that makes the world feel less heavy. But the need became something carried in silence, tucked away like a secret shame. To admit it, even to myself, felt dangerous, so the ache became normal, a companion in the quiet. Sometimes I would look across the room and try to catch his eyes, hoping that maybe they would soften, maybe they would remember, but his gaze slid past me, landing on a newspaper, a television screen, or nothing at all. And every time, it felt like another small wound added to the collection already inside me. I learned to smile at family dinners, to laugh at jokes with friends, to play the part of a woman who had everything under control. But behind the curtain of performance was an emptiness no one could see, because it's easy to hide silence when the world only listens to noise. What no one tells you is that routine can become a prison. The same meals, the same small talk, the same distant gestures, all while something inside is screaming to be touched, to be loved, to be reminded that passion is not just for the young. The days became a blur of doing what needed to be done, cooking, cleaning, working, smiling, while the heart shrank smaller and smaller until it barely remembered how to swell. There were fleeting moments when a memory would break through the numbness. The way his hands once trembled the first time he held me. The way his lips once traced promises against my skin. The way laughter once echoed through the house like a song no one wanted to end. Those memories would come like ghosts, haunting in their sweetness, reminding me of what had been lost. Sometimes they brought tears, sometimes anger, but most often they left me with nothing but a hollow ache. Years of silence teach a person to move carefully, to stop asking for more, to stop reaching out for what will not be given. It's easier to fold the hunger into the corners of the heart, to tuck it away where it won't be noticed, but the truth is, it never disappears. It waits quietly for something, anything, that will bring it back to life. And in that waiting, there is both pain and hope. The strangest part was realizing that even in the emptiness, love hadn't fully died. It was buried under the dust of years, muted by the absence of touch and words, but it was still there like embers under ash. And that was the cruelest truth of all, because love that lingers without being fed becomes a kind of torment. It whispers reminders of what once was, daring the heart to believe that maybe, just maybe, it could return. 30 years beside someone, yet unseen. 30 years of waiting for a hand to reach across the distance. 30 years of longing, wrapped in silence, so thick it became a second skin. And yet, despite it all, the heart still waited. It waited for the day it would no longer be invisible, and then one day it was. It happened without warning in the smallest of ways, yet it carried the force of a storm breaking open the sky. After years of emptiness, of routine so predictable it felt like breathing out of habit, there was suddenly a moment that cut through everything. A look that lingered longer than it should have, a glance that didn't slide past me as it had for decades, but settled, deep and steady, as if remembering something that had been forgotten. For a second I froze, almost afraid to move, afraid it would vanish like a dream upon waking. But it didn't. His eyes stayed, and in them was a softness I hadn't seen since the early days, when everything between us was new, when even silence was charged with desire. It felt like time bent backward. In that gaze, I wasn't the woman worn by years of neglect and silence. I was the same one who had once been held with trembling hands, kissed with urgency, touched like every inch of me was holy. My breath caught, and for the first time in so long, I felt the spark of being alive in the way only love and desire can bring. It was terrifying and beautiful all at once, like stepping back into a place I thought had been locked away forever. That night, something shifted between us. He reached across the space in our bed, not with obligation, not with the dull weight of routine, but with a quiet hunger that spoke louder than words. His fingers brushed against mine, and the shock of it went straight through me. It was the simplest touch, skin against skin, but after years of absence, it was like fire racing through veins that had grown too used to cold. I didn't move away. I let his hand stay there, let it remind me of what I had nearly forgotten, that I still craved to be seen, to be wanted, to be touched in a way that reached beyond flesh. The first conversation that followed was hesitant, fragile, like testing the strength of glass after so many cracks. He asked if I was happy, and the question alone broke something open in me. No one had asked me that in years. I wanted to say yes, to keep the mask of composure, but the truth was too heavy. I shook my head, and his eyes filled with something I couldn't name, regret, longing, maybe both. That moment of honesty stripped away decades of silence, leaving nothing but rawness between us. When lips finally found lips again, it wasn't gentle. It was desperate, searching, filled with all the years of hunger and absence. My body remembered before my mind could catch up. The way his mouth pressed against mine, the way his hands moved with urgency and care at the same time, awakened everything I had buried. It wasn't just desire. It was a flood of memory, of feeling alive, of realizing that I had never truly stopped loving, only stopped believing love could find its way back. The soul knows when it's been seen. There is no mistaking it. When eyes met mine again with a kind of hunger that wasn't only physical but deeply human, it felt like stepping out of a long winter into sunlight so warm it hurt. All the numbness, all the silence, all the years of distance collapsed in that one moment of being recognized. To be looked at not as someone existing in the same space, but as someone desired, someone cherished, someone alive. It changed everything. The awakening wasn't about time turning back. It wasn't about trying to become who we once were. It was about realizing that even after 30 years of distance, something deeper had survived, something that could rise again if given the chance. It wasn't the same fire of youth. It was slower, richer, more powerful because it came after knowing loss. It was love that had been tested by silence, stripped of illusions, and yet still strong enough to burn again. That night, lying in the dark with his hand resting over mine, I felt a pulse inside me I thought had died. It wasn't just desire, it was life returning. It was knowing that after so many years of being unseen, I was visible again, seen not as a habit, not as a shadow, but as a woman, as a soul, as a body aching to be touched. The walls that silence had built began to crumble, and through the cracks came light I had been starving for, and with that light, desire returned. It was strange how quickly the body remembered. For years it had lived in silence, movements careful, gestures restrained, touch absent. I had convinced myself that the hunger for closeness had gone, that time and distance had dulled it into something faint and forgettable. Yet the moment his hand lingered on mine, the moment his eyes carried that weight again, something deep inside broke free. Fingers trembled not from age, but from the shock of desire rushing back into veins that had been starved of it. Breath came uneven, heavy, like the body was awakening from a long, cold sleep. It wasn't lust. At least not lust alone. Lust is fleeting, shallow, a spark that burns out quickly. What surged through me was deeper, rooted in years of longing and love that had never truly died. It was passion, yes, but it was also memory, tenderness, and ache, all colliding into one. The way his touch slid across my skin felt like a reminder that I was still alive, still a woman, still someone worth wanting. I had spent so long believing that part of me had been erased, yet here it was, returning with an intensity I could barely contain. Every kiss became a flood. Lips pressing against mine carried not just heat but history, decades of absence collapsing into a single breath. My body leaned into him instinctively, as if it had been waiting all this time, keeping itself ready for the day passion would come back. And when it did, it was overwhelming. The softness of his mouth, the strength of his hands, the way his breath mixed with mine. It was as though I was being claimed and reclaimed at the same time. The silence that had lived between us was replaced by sound, the rustle of sheets, the hitch of breath, the whispered words that broke through walls we thought were unbreakable. Each touch dug deeper, pulling out pieces of myself I thought had been buried forever. My skin felt hypersensitive, every inch alive with need, every nerve ending reaching out for him. The warmth of his body pressed against mine, the rhythm of his heartbeat pounding into me. It all came together to awaken something raw, something almost too powerful to contain. And yet beneath the fire there was tenderness. The way he held me was not only with desire, but with reverence, as though he too had been waiting, aching, starving. His hands weren't careless. They were steady, deliberate, moving over me not just to ignite, but to remember, to rediscover. It was a rediscovery of me, of us, of what had once been and could still be. In those moments, years of distance melted. I was no longer invisible. I was seen, touched, cherished in ways I had nearly forgotten. The passion wasn't wild in the reckless sense. It was wild in its depth, in its truth, in the way it made me feel both vulnerable and whole at the same time. My body ached, not from neglect anymore, but from the intensity of being alive again. Desire returned with such force that it scared me. To want so deeply after years of emptiness felt dangerous, as if opening that part of myself could lead to breaking all over again. But the fear was eclipsed by the hunger. And the hunger was fed again and again with every kiss, every touch, every whispered breath between us. It was not just about the physical closeness. It was the emotional nakedness that came with it. to be held in a way that reminded me I was still wanted, still beautiful, still alive, stripped away the layers of silence and distance. His body against mine was not just passion, it was love reborn in the most vulnerable form. It was a reminder that intimacy is not about perfection but about presence, to be there fully with no walls, no masks, only raw truth between two people. As the night deepened, I felt the years fall away. The lines on our faces, the weight of time, the distance of silence, all of it dissolved in the fire of our closeness. There was only us, rediscovered, reignited, alive in ways that words can barely capture. And when the trembling slowed, when breath steadied, when skin pressed into skin in the quiet aftermath, what remained was not just satisfaction, but a deep, unshakable knowing. Desire had not died. It had been waiting, patient and silent, buried beneath routine and distance. And now it was alive again, stronger for having been lost, more sacred for having returned. And in that return, love felt new again. There is something different about love that comes back after being lost. It doesn't feel like the quick fire of youth, wild and reckless. It feels heavier, deeper, almost sacred, as though every moment must be held carefully because it carries the weight of everything that almost slipped away. After decades of silence, of living side by side like strangers in the same house, rediscovering intimacy felt like finding treasure buried in the ruins of time. It wasn't just about the physical closeness that returned. It was the emotional depth, the kind of closeness that makes the heart feel raw and alive in the same breath. The first time laughter filled the room again, real laughter, it startled me. It wasn't the polite sound we had shared for years at family gatherings or when life demanded performance. It was a laugh that came from the belly, unguarded, free. The sound of it cut through me, warming places that had grown cold. It felt like hearing the voice of someone I thought I had lost, yet realizing it had been there all along, just buried. That moment reminded me that intimacy isn't built only in bedrooms. It's built in the softness of shared glances, in the comfort of laughter, in the gentleness of being known again. When he began to speak to me, not the surface words of schedules and routines, but words that carried weight, confessions, regrets, desires, I felt something open inside. It was as though we had been holding back rivers for decades, and now the dams were breaking, flooding us with truth. We stayed up late into the night, speaking of everything and nothing, peeling back layers we had both hidden. The silence had not erased who we were. It had only buried us under years of distance. Now, with each word, we uncovered one another again. And with each uncovering, love grew stronger, not in spite of the years we had lost, but because of them. The physical closeness was powerful, yes, but it was the way his hand lingered in mine after, the way his eyes searched mine as though trying to read every secret, the way his voice softened when he spoke my name. It was those things that consumed me. It wasn't just desire. It was intimacy that came from being seen, fully, after so long in the shadows. To be touched on the body was one thing, but to be touched in the heart after decades of silence, that was something beyond words. Every shared look carried history. Every touch carried memory. There was no part of us untouched by the years, but that was what made it deeper. Love felt richer now, because it had survived silence. It had lived through neglect, through distance, through decades where it might have withered away completely. And yet it endured, waiting quietly until it could rise again. That survival gave it a power that no youthful passion could ever hold. This love was not new. It was reborn. What consumed me most was the gentleness. Passion returned, yes, but with it came tenderness, patience, a reverence that hadn't existed before. His hands no longer rushed, they lingered. His kisses were not just hungry, they were filled with meaning. It was as though he wanted not just to claim me, but to cherish me, to remind me that love is not only fire, but also light, steady and unwavering. In that tenderness, I felt safe, and in that safety, desire burned brighter than ever. There were nights when we lay in silence, not the heavy silence of before, but a silence filled with peace, with the sound of two heartbeats steadying each other. No words were needed then. His arm draped over me, my head resting against him, and for the first time in years I felt at home. Not in the house, not in the routine, but in him. Home was not the walls around us. Home was the space where our souls met again. It was overwhelming, in the best way, to realize that love can return when least expected, to feel more consumed by it now, after everything, than in the beginning. To know that something thought dead could come back stronger, deeper, more sacred. It made me understand that intimacy is not only about the body, but about the willingness to open again, to trust again, to let love take root after it has been scorched by time. And so, the rediscovery was not just of him, but of myself, of the woman who had once been full of fire and laughter, who had been hidden away behind years of silence. With every touch, every word, every look, I found her again. I found myself in the reflection of his eyes, in the strength of his embrace, in the way love poured back into me, as though it had never truly left. The kind of love that returns after decades is not fragile. It is stronger, forged by loss, tested by silence, and made sacred by survival. It consumes not with recklessness, but with certainty. And when it returns, it does not simply fill the body, it fills the soul. And when it came back with everything. If this story touched your heart, don't let it fade into silence. Like, share, and subscribe to hear more true love stories where passion is reborn, desire awakens, and love proves it can survive even after years of emptiness. Until the next story, keep believing, because love always finds its way back.